Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Just waiting for it to log into the group. Yeah, it's Transformational Tuesday. Good morning. It's Transformational Tuesday. It's Transformational Tuesday and a transformational day it is. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It is Transformational Tuesday. Um, Yeah, and I'm excited to be here because this is going to be a great conversation. I apologize. Wait, first of all, let me apologize for yesterday. My system shut off this morning. It was having some issues. So before we start, there's two things. So I can pre-do the videos, and you guys tell me because this is your videos, and it's really how you want the content, right? So good morning, everyone. Here's the thing. Before we start, I have a couple of questions. So would you prefer me pre-do the videos? That way they can just upload right at the time. If they upload right at the time, then that means Grand Rising, right? So then I would just be watching it with you guys. So I would still be, doing the prompts, but I would just be watching it, and I won't be live. And then that way, any technical difficulties is kind of handled before. I don't know if just going on live every day. I don't know if it's a capacity thing that's happening. I'm not sure. So just let me know. So a live Q&A. Okay. Well, thank you guys for just working with me as I work through this, through these challenges. But it's Transformational Tuesday, so let's transform the conversation. Let's transition this conversation. And today's topic, you guys, um, today is going to be a great conversation. But before we go into that, hey, good morning, Candace. Before we go into this conversation, you guys, you already know what to do. Let's take a deep breath, right? Let's take this time, which is your time, right? No pressure, no judgment, right? Just present in our body, present in the all presence, right? And I just want to welcome you back to Project Life, where we turn theory into practice, you guys. Again, you're going to hear me talk about just, hey, we know a lot of things. We know what we should be eating. We know how we should be talking. We know what to do. But sometimes we struggle, right, to do the thing that we know to do. And so the whole part of this project, if it's Project Life, School of Life, which is the membership, Elevating Life, which is the podcast, and then it's the Elevating Life coaching program, which is the higher tier. But then it's like the growth, right? The growth membership, the elevate membership, and the legacy membership, right? These are there to really help meet you where you're at in this process. All right. So before we dive in, I just want you to put one word in the chat to describe how you are feeling today. One word in the chat just to describe how are you feeling today. My word is fulfill, right? I always talk about this sense of fullness that I feel in, you know, this project is really fulfilling. You know, the work works through you before it works on you before it works through you. And so things like researching and all of that, I think that it definitely, stretches my capacity. So I hope it's doing the same for you guys. We are in the last week of Black History Month, and this week we're talking, or this month we're talking about self love, right? This is the month of love, and we use this lemons condition, and the lemons condition is truly what I talked about in my dissertation, From Lemons to Lemonade. Miss Angela Crown says she's feeling divine. Okay, Miss Dewana says she's feeling focused. All right, so in the in my dissertation, From Lemons to Lemonade, emotional intelligence as a catalyst to stopping procrastination and to attaining success in entrepreneurs, African American women entrepreneurs, I noticed that there was a lemon condition that was a consequence of these systematic barriers, right? The systemic barriers that was placed on us. So a lot of just like to say slavery, growing up in impoverished environments, trauma, sometimes not even trauma, just the lack of knowing, right? Of the lack of awareness, coming from communities that probably wasn't as educated, probably really didn't understand spirituality, right? And so it created this, what I call the lemons condition. So it created this lemons condition, and what that lemons condition was that these individuals tend to lack the energy, um, which was the capacity, right? The energy to really expand and grow. They lack the energy, the motivation, right? Because every time they start, they would stop, or just all of these barriers that they had to fight, not just externally but internally. So you got the lemons. I mean, the lack the energy, the motivation, the organizational, operational skills, right? To really keep their businesses going, like the right structures, the right operational things, those type of things, the necessary supports, right? Which is what we're talking about now, just a family that really um back behind them. And then the skill sets, right? How to effectively communicate. What is emotional intelligence, right? So this limits condition was given to me as a download by the creator. And so the stop and now framework, so the limits would be the diagnosis code. I'm not saying diagnosis. So the limits would be kind of like the diagnosis. The stop and now framework would be like the prescription, right? So going through these things, and then the outcome would be lemonade, right? Like learning how to leverage your time, um, establishing emotional resilience, maintaining your health and well-being, overcoming your obstacles and limiting beliefs, navigating life on your terms, attaining your goals, right? Developing healthy relationships, and truly establishing your net worth. And so that mythology really birthed out of, you know, my journey as a doctor, right? And so looking at research and other things that I can do to bring to this community, right? To really help us to make lemonade with the lemons that we've been given. And that kind of sets us up for today's conversation, because yesterday we talked about beliefs, right? The beliefs that we have about everything, about the beliefs we have, which is that we need to do everything alone, right? That in some way I don't need the help, or I'm supposed to know how to do this, and things like that, right? But today we're going to shift this conversation, right? Not just about who supports us, but how the environments and the people around us really shape us. All right. So let me tell you about Danielle. So Danielle used to think that avoiding toxic people and situations was enough, right? She cut off draining friendships. She set firm boundaries at work and avoided stressful situations whenever possible. Okay, but something was still missing, right? She still felt stuck. She still felt easily triggered by certain comments, and still avoided situations that made her uncomfortable. If that resonated with you, put a one in the chat for me, right? You've cut off people, right? You've cut off draining friendships, and draining family members, and quit jobs, right? You've set boundaries, or tried to, right, at work or at home and things like that. You've truly tried to avoid stressful situations, maybe stressful relationships, right? But something still was missing, right? It still wasn't like clicking, right? You still felt this sense of like I'm stuck, like I'm doing everything like that I know to do, but I still felt stuck. But she still felt stuck, right? What she didn't realize was that boundaries alone, listen, they're just not enough. All right, they're just not enough. She needed to expand her capacity, right? Avoiding triggers wasn't helping her grow, you guys. It was keeping her in a bubble, right? So real growth truly comes when she learned how to navigate discomfort without letting it control her. Okay. Now, this is a concept, this, you've heard me say this before. Sometimes it has nothing to do with our triggers, right? It has nothing to do with our past. It doesn't have to do that. she had the face of Dewana, right? So it had my current situation sometimes have nothing to do with the fact that I didn't have a mother, or that I was molested, or that I was physically abused, or that I was emotionally abused, right? That I lived in a impoverished neighborhood. Like some of the things that Sheila is facing, Dr. Sheila Little is facing today, has everything to do with my desire to expand my life. Okay. And so that means that I have to expand my capacity, right? So here's the difference between boundaries and capacity, right? Because I want to shift the shift we need to make, right? So boundaries can protect you, right? But they shouldn't limit you. So boundaries can protect you, but they shouldn't limit you. If your response to a trigger is always avoidance, you will never get the chance to build emotional resilience. What does that mean, Sheila? So boundaries, sometimes we use them as walls. Remember, I gave you the definition or the analogy about the boundary being the bouncer. Okay. And I'm at capacity, so I can't let you in, but you keep trying to get in, right? And instead of me holding firm to my values and feeling all of that uncomfortableness that is required by me really setting the guidelines, right? I blame the people out there. Like, oh, they disrespectful. They still trying to get in the club and they trying to pay me money. They just don't respect my job. I'm the bouncer. Like, no, that's what the bouncer job is. The boundary is there, that's your guideline. That is what you're saying. Hey, this is what I'm allowing in, right? And this is what I'm giving out. And everybody is not going to accept that. So, in that lack of acceptance of that, you guys, here's the thing. That's where you grow emotional resilience, right? That's where the judgment comes. Oh, she thinks she the stuff now because she ain't doing right. And you got to hear that. And then you got to feel that, right? And then you got to choose, right? You got to choose your your worth, your value, whatever that is. And it's in those times where we start to shift and make new rules for ourselves and set up new guidelines for ourselves and stand up differently, that the environment that we previously was in, be it our own personal environment, our body, our family environment, the place we live, listen, it's not shifting. You are. And so it's trying to pull back that old mindset, that old way of thinking. And so that's the emotional dis-ease that we feel, right? And that's triggering, right? And it triggers us to make us want to go back to a place that, that we know this is why I have this guideline. This is why, you know, I'm, um, I'm saying no to that, to you, and yes to me, until I can build the emotional capacity where I can say yes to you and yes to me, and it's in alignment with my values. Okay. So triggers reveal areas that we need to grow, you guys. If something bothers you deeply, it's often tied to a belief or a wound or a past experience that's still shaping your decisions. Okay. Let me say that again. Triggers reveal areas where we need to grow. All right. It sometimes, if something bothers you deeply, you guys, it's often tied to a belief, a wound, or a past experience that's still shaping your decisions today. So if we think about a trigger, it's really like, hey, it's sometimes, and remember, a trigger is like popping you out the moment. So this conversation is with a person that you're having. They don't know you. They don't know you that good to have all of this feeling against you, but you're taking it personal. Why? Because you had a personal experience that's similar to that. And so now you're responding to this present moment from this prior situation, this prior wound, this prior old outdated belief, right? And that is shaping your current life experiences, right? Necessary support isn't about keeping you comfortable, you guys. It's about placing you in environments that challenge your health, that challenge you in healthy transformational ways. All right. So this whole necessary supports, mind you, it's going to take you out your comfort zone, right? You're going to go out your comfort zone, and it's going to be triggering. and you're going to have a lot of stuff come up as you're asking for assistance and as you're supporting yourself through this growth, right? But the truth is that is where the growth is, right? That is where the expansion happens, and that's where we solidify like who we're going to become. If you think about it, if you go and even create a garden right now, right, you got to till the ground, right? You got to create the space for it to happen, right? So when we think about uncomfortableness, stepping out of our comfort zone, it's like, hey, I'm going to cultivate a new land. But I have to cultivate it first, right? I have to kind of survey. I have to till it. I have to measure it out. I have to get it set before I even put the foundation on it, right? I have to create the space. And building that foundation then becomes the work, the emotional work, the mental work. Like, what skills do I need? Maybe I need to learn how to communicate. Maybe I need to learn, effective communication. Maybe I need to learn about the levels of energy that I'm working on. Right? Maybe I need to switch off my child mind and stop allowing the kid in me to run things and start to become the dope for myself in this in this inner child. Right? So this shift in perspective helps us to break the cycle of self-reliance, right? And recognize how triggers really reveal areas where we actually need support, you guys. Not, I'm saying need support. And mind you, in nature needs other things in nature, right? The flowers need the bees to come pollinate it, right? Because if the bees don't come pollinate, then we won't have any flowers. That's not a desire. That's not a want, right? We need the balance of the sun and the moon, and right, these things are structures that are interdependent of one another, and they need one another. And if we continue to see need, right, what do I need to be my highest best self as a crutch, or that I'm needy, or these type of things, right, we will never expand and grow to the capacity that God really created us to grow. All right. So Danielle thought that, back to Danielle, she actually thought that avoiding toxic people and setting boundaries was enough. She believed that if she removed draining people, you guys, she would feel better. But even after cutting off this negativity, she still felt exhausted. She still felt triggered by small things and still hesitated to ask for help. Why? Because the belief that she had to do it all alone was still running in her background, you guys. So a lot of times we're cutting off people only to say, I'll do it myself. I can be by myself. I can do bad by myself, right? Instead of what is going to be required of me to make a healthy connection with this individual. And that's a daily thing. Like, who do I need to be today to continue to create a healthy relationship with my sons, right? I've been knowing my oldest son for 22 years, right? But I still need to show up in my today self to continue to cultivate an environment where our relationship can continue to thrive, right? If we're in dating or whatever, right? There's this, who do I need to be today? Because whenever I take on a mentality that I can do bad by myself, you irritate me, let me cut you off, right? Now I sever these relationships around me, and the work that's required to gain it back is a mighty work, right? So in these people that we have around us and these jobs and careers that we pick, guess what? They're challenging, right? Even being a CEO, you guys, is challenging because it's not always you the CEO, so you get to say everything that needs to get done. No, I have a team of people who is advising me. I have to take direction from my coaches and my mentors, right? So there's a submitting process, and then sit a lot of times in my feminine energy and just be present and allow the system to work, allow the process that I put together to work, right? Allow the leads to come. All of those things, right, can be triggering and emotional, but they are helping me to really shift my capacity. And similar to Danielle, the same way, as you start to shift, as you start to grow, right, there's a process of just being present, right, and allowing these emotions and this uncertainty and this anxiousness to kind of come up, right? But we don't have to act on that stuff, okay? Okay. This is where triggers come from. Triggers aren't just about what other people do to us. Okay. They reveal how we see ourselves a lot of times. Okay. If someone offers help, for example, because we're talking about necessary supports, if someone offers help and you feel resistant, that's a trigger, right? Because because deep down, you might believe that needing help makes you weak. So now them just asking, right, triggers that belief. If someone sets a boundary with you, you may take it personally. Listen, that's a trigger. Why? Because you might associate boundaries or guidelines with rejection, right? If you're avoiding challenging situations, things that challenge you, that stretch you, that's a trigger, you guys. Why? Because you might believe failure means you're not good enough. Okay. So if you're avoiding challenging situations, a lot of times it's because you're thinking, I might not get it. They may say no, right? And this is, hey, you have a limiting belief in here, like you're not good enough to do this thing, to show up in this way, and you're fearing it. Okay. So triggers that resist support, um, and keep us stuck. So the fear of being a burden. I don't want to inconvenience anyone. This is a huge one, right? The fear of being a burden. A lot of times I'm not asking for help, because that trigger this fear of being a burden, right? So I don't want to be an inconvenience to anyone. The fear of being rejected. This is a huge one, right? What if I ask for help and they say no, right? So that triggers you. That triggers this fear of rejection in you, right? The fear of losing control. If I let someone else help, they may do it wrong. We want to be in so much control of our life, you guys, because of how it feels to not be in control. Okay. And we just have to really build a different, good morning, Dale. We really have to build a different relationship with our emotions and really stop seeing them as good or bad and seeing them as a necessary process to us as we grow and as we develop, you guys. And then another one is this, just the fear of vulnerability, right? If I admit I need support, it means I'm not strong. So a lot of us just don't want to feel vulnerable. We don't want to feel, and I say like vulnerableness is like the flower blossoming, right? And it's kind of like, oh, I just feel exposed, right? I've been hiding behind these feelings. I've been protecting myself with these boundaries. I've been very rigid in what I share, what I don't share. And I've been comfortable because I've been blaming everybody else, right? But then when I start to blossom, there's this sense of, you see me. But guess what, guys? We all want to be seen. We all want to be seen. We want to be heard, right? And the thing about it is, and we want to be accepted for all of who we are, right? We want people to accept our flaws and our gifts and our uniqueness, right? We want that, but that requires a level of vulnerability. That requires you expanding your capacity. That requires you to go through these triggers, right? And not let them define the moment. Listen, I'm talking about mental health. Right. So our mental health is so important to us. Okay. I'm not talking about mental illness. See, my mom has a mental illness. Okay. My mom has bipolar. That mental illness affects her capacity to do some things, to think some ways. My brother has schizophrenia, right? Him having schizophrenia is a mental illness, you guys. So that in itself affects his capacity to do some things. But when we start talking about mental health, a lot of us aren't mentally ill, right? A lot of us just have a capacity issue. Like we are triggered by some things, right? And it makes us retreat in. And so we have to learn emotional intelligence, right? We have to really get back into a relationship with ourselves so these triggers don't define the moments in our life. And now we're repeating the same thing over and over again. And that's truly what mental health is, right? It's how am I growing? How am I moving? How am I adjusting to life and responding versus reacting? All right. Because here's the truth. Triggers show us what we've been avoiding. Boundaries should protect, not isolate us. All right. And strength isn't doing it all alone, you guys. It's knowing when to allow the help. All right. So the old way of thinking, I'll just cut people off and handle it myself. Here's a new thinking. Maybe my resistance to help is a sign that I need to expand my capacity and receive this support. Right. And if you need that assistance, like I said, DM me. You can go into one of my higher level programs if you don't like the group atmosphere, or sign up for Project Life. The old thinking is, if I struggle, it's because I need better boundaries. So I need to really enforce like this boundary. But maybe I don't just need boundaries. Maybe I need an environment to be in that helps me grow. Okay. And then the old way of thinking, I have to protect myself from being drained. This is a big one, you guys. Instead of just and then the new thinking is, instead of just avoiding bad energy, I'll seek out spaces that replenish me. I always say, I have family members. If I know my family member is that type of person, right? The draining thing is not that family member. It's me trying to change that family member. That's what's draining, because in my mind, I want them to be so different, right? And then seeing them show up how they show up, and I'm having a different idea of how they should or could be, right? That's the draining part, because I'm like, ugh, why she always doing that, or why he always doing that? And that's the draining. The individual itself ain't draining me. It's what I'm telling myself about the individual. And that applies to our situations, our environments, and everything, right? It's the stories that we tell ourselves about the individuals in our life. So instead of avoiding what we deem bad energy, we have to seek out spaces that replenish us, because just like the ebb and flow of life, everybody is not going to fuel you. So we have to make conscious decisions to, hey, you know what? I saw this lady. I want to connect with her on Facebook. She really giving off good. I'm a DM her. Guess how you gonna feel? All type of feelings, right? I remember Candace reached out to me. She's on right now, and she's like, hey, what's up? Now Candace was like my little sister growing up. I'm sure that wasn't an easy conversation for Candace to have, right? Um, yeah, Candace just said that's me trying to keep from being drained, right? So she reached out to me. I'm sure that wasn't an easy. I hung out with her big sisters and things, right? But she like, hey, she's talking and all of that. And she's really, like, hey, but what I'm saying is that she made the call. She made the call. And so many of us is like, I don't want to expose myself. That's the draining part. I don't want to be judged, right? That's the draining part that is keeping you stuck. And we have to step past that, right? So that we can get the support that we need. And I'm not saying just me. I'm saying it's people right now that I'm reaching out to that I'm like, ooh, I don't know if they're going to respond back. Sometimes those cliches come in of their position or like how many followers they have. But guess what? I'm making that call. I'm reaching out. I want to connect. I want to talk about that. Okay. So Candace said, that's me trying. Oh, Duana said, that's absolutely true and a great way to look at it. Thank you, friend. All right. So triggers aren't always things to avoid. Sometimes they're signals that we're resisting what we actually need, you guys. Whether that's support, whether that's to be challenged, or whether it's growth, right? So instead of shutting people out, what if we opened ourselves up to the right ones? Instead of shutting out everybody who bad for me, what if I got courageous and said, you know what? I'm just gonna go on a venture and meet new people, right? Because sometimes we can't change our family. Sometimes the friends that get on our nerves, guess what? They just irritate, but I love them, right? So if I cut them off, I'm cutting off all the stuff that, all the stuff they did do. And I don't need to cut off that. If I need certain things, let me manually switch over and go out and get the things that I need, and then create the guidelines in these friendships, right? Or these environments, if it's at work, if it's at home, right? And even with ourselves, okay? All right. So triggers are emotional reactions that happen automatically, you guys. They come from people sometimes they come from people who make you question your worth, right? So sometimes these triggers come up around people that make you question, like, I mean, are you trying to call me this? Are you trying to say that, right? Oftentimes they come up in environments that drain us, that we deem drain us, right? Drain your energy before you even realize it, right? So I do want to say that this trigger is a quick thing that's happening. It ain't like you thinking, oh yeah, that triggered me. No, it's like as the thoughts is coming in my mind to say, my mouth is already putting it together, right? There's not like a thought and then it's like, okay, what am I gonna say about that? Like, I'm in action. So as I'm saying it, it's coming out. That's just as fast as a trigger is happening, right? And so we need to become aware sometimes in reflection, like, is that how I want to respond? Is that how I want to feel? And really create that vision, right? And do the assessments as we're implementing, reassess, and have grace and get out of this mindset of right and wrong. Okay. All right. So, who or what triggers your self doubt, stress, and exhaustion, right? Do you notice patterns in how you feel around certain people in specific situations, right? Are you constantly adjusting yourself to be accepted by others? Okay. Now, this is good because I want to share this because I talked a lot. As you can see, I can talk a lot. Right? I got whooped a lot when I was little, right? Like, you always think you know everything, you think you're smart or whatever. And again, you guys, I'm sharing these stories not to make this about me, but I want you to see the simplicity in things that we can make complicated. I got whooped a lot. They said I talk too much, right? So when I got older, I kind of had this apologetic kind of feeling like, oh, I want to say this. I'm sorry. I'm just, very touchy feely around things because in these new environments, when I'm asked to speak, like, I didn't give myself the authority at that point to be the speaker, to be the space that owned me, right? I was still looking for the discipline, the reprimand, like, oh, why you say that? Why would you do that, right? And I had to say, Sheila, that is not your environment anymore, right? And really make that contrast within myself. All right. All right. So now I want you to imagine waking up and feeling at peace with who you are and with who you are, um, and who you allow in your life. No longer shrinking yourself to fit into rooms, right, where you don't belong. No longer feeling exhausted from constantly giving and really never receiving, right? And that's what happens when you control your triggers, all right? Because a lot of times this trigger is triggering this, I need to do something. I need to do something, right? And so when we're always doing, a lot of times we're not receiving. When we always imparting the narrative and saying, oh, well, I need to cut you off, I need to do that, then we're not in receptive mode. All right. All right. Studies show that 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 the people you surround yourself with, right, directly impact your emotional well-being. Okay. And so sometimes we really do have to step out and get around the right environments and the right people. All right. Because your peace is priceless. Right. All right. So let's go into our Bible. If that made sense, put a 2 in the chat for me. If that made sense, put a 2 in the chat for me. All right. So our principle verse today, how do I know that expansion is where it is and it can be a truth that we live by? Like I said, some people can't expand, right? Their capacity is what it is. And maybe our capacity is what it is. I don't know if you've ever watched this video, and I'm gonna post it in a group later. But it was about a guy, and he had like some golf balls in a jar, and he was like, "Is the jar full yet?" Right? And then after he put if you heard this, put a 3 in the chat. So so the students say, yep. And so then he takes these small rocks and he pours it, in the jar. And he says, is that full yet? And then students say, yeah, right. And so then he takes this sand, and so he pours the sand in there, right? And he gets all the sand in the jar. And then he said, is it full yet? And the students say, yeah, right. And so he opens up a beer, like poured a beer in there, right? So when we think about capacity, sometimes we're talking about prioritizing life too, because if he would have put the sand in, so let's say the big stuff is the big things in our life, right? The rocks are the important people in our life. The rocks are the things that we do, right? The sand is like the stuff that's happening on social media, and then the water is just, brings it all together. All right. If you would have put the water in, if you would have put the sand in there, or the rocks in there, right? The things, the tasks that I have to do, the problems on social media. If he would have filled that jar up with that first, right? He couldn't get the important people in his life, right? Because it would have filled up. So sometimes it's not what we have. Sometimes capacity is not about growing, right? And becoming bigger. Sometimes capacity is just about how am I rearranging my life and the people in my life, right? It wasn't saying, but it wasn't saying, what was it, D? Um, Sometimes the capacity is about like how I'm shifting things in my life, how I'm shifting the conversation. So everything in a sense fits and everything has a place. And sometimes the idea of not needing support is really a limited belief, and it's out of place, you guys. Right? It's something that we're not prioritizing. And so at the end of the day, when we need it, because we filled ourselves up with all of the limiting beliefs or the thoughts of not enoughness, right? When it's time to go ask for help, I have really nobody to do that. So when we think about expansion, let's think about it in a way of prioritizing what I need, right? Where are my gifts? Where am I fueling my areas? All right. Okay. So our principal verse, if that made sense, put a 4 in the chat for me. All right. So our principal verse, enlarge the, so it's Isaiah 54:2. Enlarge the place of your tent. Stretch your tent curtains wide. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes. Now, I'm sure that this was given to a specific group of people for a specific time, but I'm using it here because I want you to know that whatever that situation that in the Bible, whatever that situation that was going on, it probably was a capacity problem, right? It reminds me of the woman that went to her her after her husband died, right? He said, go grab all of your bottles, right? Go grab all of the jars that you can get and then go and borrow, right? Get as much as you can, right? Get as much as you can. Why get as much as you can? Because when this oil start pouring, right, it's going to pour until the last bottle that you give me. If we think about capacity as like this, enlarge the place of your tent, stretch your tent curtains wide, don't hold back, lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes, right? This is Isaiah 54:2 verse, right? Also pairing that with this woman who went and got these jars. Guess when that in that particular parable, when did the oil stop? At her last jar. So what if she would have only got 3 jars, right? And here's the thing. The jars that she got, you guys, those were the jars that she sold, right? Those were the jars that she sold. And in the powerful thing about that narrative is she didn't just use her jars. Guess what she needed to do? She needed to go to her neighbors and do what? Ask them for their jars, borrow their jars, right? So she goes and she borrows like these people's jars too, right? And so she gets, her and her son gets these jars. So if she only did use her jars, now mind you, she had to pay off her husband's debt, all right? If she only used her jars, I'm gonna ask y'all, would she have been able to pay off her husband's debt and live her and her kids? Probably not. All right. So this is the whole necessary supports, right? She needed her neighbor's jars, right? To give her what she needed to survive for the rest of her life because her husband wasn't there anymore to provide that resource, right? So she might have to get uncomfortable, right? She might have had to get uncomfortable for a minute, right? I got to go to these neighbors and say, hey, neighbors, do y'all have any jars that I can borrow and vessels that I can borrow? And she walking down the street with all this stuff clicking and clacking empty, right? Now she got hundreds of jars or maybe thousands of jars, right? And here's what she didn't even know. She didn't know that she was going to pour the oil in the jars, right? So she didn't even know that she was going to pour how much oil. She just went and collected these jars. So when we start thinking about asking for help and needing support, you guys, sometimes it ain't in our own house. It ain't in our own body. Sometimes we got to borrow our belief, borrow our faith, borrow a word, right? Borrow money, resources, support, right, from other people. And then God will then say, okay, now I'm going to bless that thing, right? And he blessed those jars. So in this, why this scripture works, this Isaiah scripture, and I tied that story to it because it was about expanding her tent, right? So expanding your tent, stretching your curtains while opening yourself up, right? Do not hold back, lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes, right? Which is like anchor yourself down, right? So this scripture is all about expansion, not protecting what we have, but actively making room for more, you guys, right? We have to actively be pursuing more. And I know that brings up, because in my spirit, what came up is, I don't want to seem too greedy. I don't want to seem too needy. I don't want to. Where did we get that from? When you was little, and you was like, can I get some more? Like, girl, you greedy. You want too much. Right, boy, get out of here. I just fed you. You ain't really hungry, right? So that desire to want more in some way got stifled from a situation that has nothing to do with our expansion, us expanding today, but it's still affecting it. All right. It speaks to the growth based boundaries, right? So instead of limiting, right, we're lengthening, strengthening, and stretching, right? And it challenges us. It challenges us to stop holding back out of fear and start building structure, you guys, that support us. All right. And then the second verse or the promise is that the Lord will fight for you, right? You need only to be still. Candace said that goes back to not being ashamed to ask for help. Yes, to not be ashamed. And guess what? Not even to not be ashamed. Can I add to that, Candace? It's not just about not being ashamed. It's about being aware that asking for help makes me feel ashamed. And I need to work on that, right? Because there's no reason. I need to rewrite that because what am I feeling ashamed about? And really go through and reflect in a non-judgmental, compassionate way of why. Why do I feel ashamed to ask for the thing that I know I need and desire? What is that about, right? And explore that. So yes, that goes back to not being ashamed. But I think that when we get ashamed, then we like, well, why am I still feeling ashamed? It must be true. No, it may still be an old belief that's the residue of that that's still within you that needs to be explored. Okay. So Exodus 14:14, the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. All right. So this reminds us, that we don't have to carry everything alone. All right. Expanding capacity doesn't mean doing more. It just really means trusting, you guys, trusting that we already have the support. All right. It challenges the belief that we have to struggle to prove our strength. Listen, sometimes the biggest steps toward growth is just allowing God and the right people to help us. Remember, I told you, I just personally feel like God worked through people, you know? And when I talked about that feminine space of just being present and allowing life to flow, allowing the things to happen and not trying to, catch everything because God had already done it. He already sent the people that need to be sent. I just need to be present enough to be pulled and moved towards that direction. All right. Or for it to be pulled towards me. Right. So it also reinforces the idea that necessary support is already in place, you guys. It's already in place. We don't have to fear being stretched beyond what we can handle. Listen, divine support is already working on your behalf as we speak today. All right, so Candace said, let me stop limiting my son's eating. LOL. He loves to ask for more food. Right. And maybe we could work on how we saying that, Candace, right? You know, maybe it's like, are you sure you hungry or do you need some water? Right? Are you sure you want some of this or can you wait another hour, right? Versus judging it, right, as you ain't hungry. Maybe we explore, like, what more do you want to eat? Are you thirsty? Or let's try some water first, right? And just offering a different thing so he doesn't feel like his desire to eat, right, is halted. All right. And how do we know that the Lord will fight for you and you need only to be still? Because there's also a verse, right? There's also a verse that says the Lord gives strength to his people. Okay. And the Lord blesses his people with peace. Okay. So that's Psalms 29 and 11. And what that means is that God's strength is always available to us. Okay. Um, but it's hard to receive it when we're always like not in receptive mode or not really looking for it. All right. Because we feel like we can do it ourselves. And a lot of us just have this belief about God, like I'm going to hide. I'm not going to expose myself. I'm going to get right with God when I get right with me, and it's like, hey, he already working for you, even in your most darkest times. All right. And so if we can really know that, that the creator has already done what he's going to do, and the people that we need is probably our next door neighbor, is probably at an arm's length away. We just got to stop feeling like that we don't need the support and stop allowing our triggers, right, to get in our way. I think that we can start to reprioritize our life and really feel the capacity, right? So at first glance, right, that scripture about enlarging your place, right? So at first glance, this verse might sound like a call to make room, right, for more. But when we bring it to the human application, right, it's about expanding our capacity mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and relationally. Relationally. Ooh, try to say that right. Mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and relationally. All right. So think about the tent, right? The tent, if you want to make it bigger, you don't stretch it out, right? You need stronger stakes, longer cords, and a stronger foundation to hold it up, right? That is exactly how you should view supports in your lives, not as something that limits us, but as something that grounds us while we grow. All right. So we often set rigid boundaries because we are afraid of being hurt or drained, but the reality is the right support doesn't trap us, right? It strengthens us, right? So if you want to grow, you must be willing to stretch beyond your comfort zone, you guys. That's the bottom line of all of this whole session. So let's get to the real part, right? If you want to grow, you must be willing to stretch beyond your comfort zone. If you want to sustain that growth, you must have a strong foundation, right? A strong foundation, support systems that hold you up instead of holding you back. And then a necessary support isn't just about avoiding toxicity, you guys. It's about building a structure that helps you to expand and really manage or receive. I don't even want to say, because everything is not toxic either, and that's a whole nother conversation, right? That's a whole nother protective mode. Like if I call you toxic in some way, I'm discounting you, which is making me feel better. And everybody just not toxic, right? People just different and we're unique, but that's a whole nother conversation. So yeah, so the verse about enlarging your tent and stretching your curtains, right? And don't hold back and lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes. This is really about just grounding yourself with supports. Because again, life is about the ebb and flow. Everybody that come into our life ain't gonna be perfect. They're not gonna have it all together. I mean, nobody that come into our life is gonna be perfect. And so how do I balance that? And where am I getting fed? Where am I getting fed? And then where am I feeding? And sometimes the place that I'm feeding probably ain't gonna feed me. And I have to find a place and become mature and become an adult, right? And go out and hunt for those places. I'm using hunt softly, but that is one of our responsibilities. All right. What just came up in my spirit is the story of Abraham, and I am taking this all the way out of context, but God told Abraham to leave his town, right, and go somewhere else. Now I know why that said it in the Bible, so I just want you to stay with me for a minute. A part of that is too, when we're around people who familiar, sometimes it's not like go out of your town. Maybe it's just go out of your familiarness, right? Your blessing that I have for you is not in the things that are familiar to you. It's in the things that may not be familiar to you. And so a lot of our friendships and a lot of our jobs and things like that were probably familiar to my 20-year-old person, or, or just familiar to me in general. And now I have to move out of that town or that space or that mindset, right? To be able to be in unfamiliar territory. And that may not look like me moving from Saginaw to Texas, but that may look like me, talking to somebody, right? All last week I have been doing DMs with people who pop in the chat. Some of the people I know, some of the people I don't know, right? And really feeling that, oh, I'm finna DM this stranger, right? Hey, this is Sheila. If you want to follow up, thank you for showing up on the show. So yeah, that's me stepping out of my comfortable people who I talk to, and we laugh, and I thank the Wannas and Dales and all those people who I talk to, right? But there was people I talked to that I didn't know, right? So I'm using an Abraham thing because Abraham blessing wasn't in the thing that he was familiar with. It was in the unfamiliar. It was him walking away from all of those things. And again, I understand the context of Abraham's story. In this context, though, I'm using it as, hey, how how comfortably uncomfortable are you because you're not willing to be uncomfortable? You're comfortably uncomfortable now, but you're not going out looking for new experiences and meeting new people and and traveling and doing things, right? Because that's uncomfortable, but you're currently uncomfortable in the comfortness. Okay. So we get to choose our comfortability, basically. Okay. So and then the Lord will fight for you, right? You need only to be still. That verse just directly speaks directly to the struggle with control, right? This feelings that we have to handle everything on our own, or that asking for help means that we're weak, you guys. Many of us have been conditioned to believe that if we don't struggle, we are not enough, right? That we have to be consistently working, proving, and protecting ourselves. I actually knew an individual was like, I need to have a grind part. Like, I'm gonna go through the grind, and I'm like, why? Right? We lived in the hood. We lived in a hood, me, Dewana, a couple of us, right? But it was people who didn't live in the hood that came over to the hood. But guess what? They had food. They had warm tables. Like they had the resources that we didn't have, right? And in some way, it made them feel. And I think that's the beauty of the hood. So I'm not talking about it. But sometimes we do have this belief that if we're not struggling, if we're not getting it out the mud, if we're not, right, that in some way it ain't enough. We ain't doing them enough, right? And so we're consistently working hard, proving and protecting ourselves. Okay. Even in our relationships, like if you ain't down for me and going through the mud with me, it's like, nah, actually, I just want to love you. I can love you in every facet that you are. Okay. And that's in your greatness too. And we have to even think about that a lot of times in our relationships, do I want this person to be the greatest person that they can be, from fear of when they realize their greatness, will they leave me? See, that don't have nothing to do with them. That has everything to do with how I feel about my self-worth. And so sometimes we meet people, and I don't know this for men, but sometimes as women, right? It's like sometimes that can be a trigger for men, right? I'm stepping into my greatness, being who I am, and it's triggering their insecurity. So what, you gonna leave me and all of those things? And it doesn't mean that. And so sometimes we don't stretch our capacity because it fits with the current mode and where we're at. And then when I have to step away, then those type of things happen, right? Those type of things trigger me. And so now I'm not moved to do the things I need to do, right? And then this the need to do it alone, right? Is a learned survival mechanism, you guys. But what if the real growth happens when you actually trust that you are already supported, you guys? Listen, strength isn't in overextending ourselves. It's in knowing when to allow support. Listen, necessary support doesn't mean you're helpless. It means you're wise enough to build a foundation that sustains you. And listen, growth doesn't come from pushing forward. It comes from learning when to lean back and trust. All right. All right. So these verses challenge us to really stop resisting the very thing that could make us strong. We're used to being on guard, setting limits, protecting our energy, setting boundaries, putting walls, telling people what to do, what not to do, and all of that. That we often forget that true expansion, you guys, requires a foundation of support. And sometimes in getting that support, I got to go through those same boundaries, walls, protective, those limits that I put up so that I can feel that stuff, transmute that energy, right, and use it for the place I'm going. All right. So where in life, I have a question, and I want you to ask, where in life am I holding back from expanding because I'm afraid of outgrowing my current support system? All right. Oh, yeah, we almost at an hour. I apologize. So this conversation, I'm not going to apologize. This conversation is, I think, worthy of being had. If you had to jump off or whatever, I just hope that you jump back on to really get the nuggets that you need, because I do think that when we talk about expanding and growing, or we think about triggers, it's like, you triggered me, so now I need to put up this boundary. You triggered me, so now I need to do this thing. And that is not the purpose of a trigger, you guys, especially in our mental health. Right now, for my brother who has schizophrenia, his trigger, right, it may be, okay, we got to switch your medication or something like that, because his trigger may be different, right, as a person that actually has a persistent and severe diagnosis. But some of us, we're just, our triggers are there to identify what we need is to expand who we are. Okay. Hey, Shamika. All right. So here is our action step for today and how we can apply this. I call it the art of life, you guys. If you read my book, you read about this. The art of life, right? Which is truly just becoming aware, releasing, and taking a different action. So step one is identify growth opportunities. That's the awareness, right? Take one challenge, opportunity, or area of life where you've been resisting some discomfort, right? Just become aware of that. And then to the release, or the reset, right? It's really shift your perspective. So instead of saying, how can I avoid this? Ask, how can I grow through this? All right. Instead of asking how to set a boundary to block this, ask, how can I position myself to expand through this? All right. And then the T is just to take action, right? So choose one way to lean into this discomfort instead of retreating from it. So instead of saying to new opportunities, say yes, and trust that you'll figure it out. Instead of avoiding the tough conversations, you guys step into it with courage and clarity. And listen, the last one is, instead of saying no new friends, because how many of us say that? How about we say yes to the people who's going to support the person that I'm becoming? All right. Because the key takeaway here is growth happens when we stop shrinking to fit into our current comfort zone, and we start stretching ourselves to really meet our potential. All right. All right, so our affirmation for today. Now let's do our affirmation together. You're gonna repeat after me, and then you can screenshot this so you can see it throughout the day. And remember, affirmation is it really doesn't work if you don't believe it. And at this point, I'm not asking you to believe this, right? But I am asking that if you don't believe it, question why you don't, and then still place it and say it so you can rewire, your neurons. All right. I embrace growth, not avoidance. I expand my capacity with courage and trust. Right. I am supported, stretched, and strengthened for my next level. Listen, I embrace growth. not avoidance. I expand my capacity with courage and trust. And I am supported, stretched, and strengthened for my next level. All right. And then our intention for today, you guys, listen, today I choose to lean into expansion instead of fear. All right. I trust that every challenge is shaping me into who I am meant to be. Listen, I am choosing to lean into expansion. So when that fear creeps up today, you guys just kind of say, you know what, I'm expanding. I got time for it today. That's what we can use that saying. I got time for it, right? Hey, listen, if this session resonated with you, drop a fire in the chat. Let's continue to celebrate your growth. And remember that if you can shape it in your mind, you can have it in your life. Remember, we're trying to get to those subscribers. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel at I Am Shaping Solutions. Invite a friend, right? Have them come on to the Elevate in Life in our group, trying to get to 1,000 members here as well. I thank everybody that I invited for accepting my invitation, and now I'm asking you to invite a friend. All right. And then make sure you join Project Life with Sheila Little. Remember this every week we do coaching labs where we can actually discuss the things that's happening within your life and really using this week's content to talk about that. All right. Listen, your next level requires a mindset shift, right? A new approach and a support system that stretches and strengthens you. And I do want you to know that Project Life is where we make this a lifestyle because we turn, listen, theory into practice. Okay. I love you and I will see you tomorrow where we're talking about stop seeing obstacles as setbacks and start using them, you guys, as stepping stones. I love you. Till later. I love you too, D. Hey, brother. Thank you, Jones Jones. Till later, you guys. Hello. Hello. Yes, hello. Hi, can I speak with Shella?